Monster Hunter Wilds, I think, is going to eventually be an incredible game. At launch, it's just kinda way too easy. Any longtime fan of the series knows the basic loop. You go out and hunt progressively difficult monsters to collect pieces of their body with which you craft gear. The gameplay, graphics, and overall scope of Monster Hunter have never been better, and lost in a movement towards a wider audience is the game's heart. The progression in Wilds is just so damned easy that in over 50 hours of playing, I never once failed to hunt while solo. Still, I had a lot of fun, and I think it's stuff that they can fix. So let's get into what all of it is in the XboxEra review of Monster Hunter Wilds. The game begins with an expedition to the Forbidden Lands. The story in these games is rarely good, and it's pretty full-on anime. Things are no different here, as you are thrust into an epic series of monster hunts. You will discover why the weather and creatures of this land are running amok. The writing's mediocre, the voice acting's over the top, and it's all very Monster Hunter. The game begins by you crafting your hunter with a deep character creation system that many will lose hours if not days in. Your overall body type and shape cannot be easily changed after your initial setup, though you can go through most of the other options at any time in your home camp. Any face can also have any cosmetic appearance or voice that you want. I think the biggest departure from previous entries is how big and expensive the main story's cutscenes feel. The new tech in Wilds is also incredible, with changing landscapes and highly detailed as long as they're new monsters. This is all juxtaposed by some of the worst, lowest res world and gear textures I can remember seeing in a current gen only title. We're 2 decades plus into the series now, and it looks like some of the older monsters and their accompanying gear sets were plucked straight out of a DS port. Still, the overall nature of the initial 15-hour-long campaign is fast and fun with no mediocre extra mechanic modes added in this time. Every mission is a monster hunt, and they're normally pretty fun. Once you roll credits, you'll have finished roughly a third of the overall game, with the latter parts focused more on leveling your hunter rank to progress. In the end, it was a massively disappointing progression curve. By the time I rolled those first credits, I was dumbfounded, as that 15 hours had taken me over 40 to get similar results in Monster Hunter Worlds. When I saw how much more content there was, I was optimistic, only to never once feel any of that classic Monster Hunter gear grind satisfaction. That heart of Monster Hunter, it's not the story, it's the world you're in and the monsters that inhabit it. Every fight is tough, with specific gear requirements to help make it possible. And that's gone in Wilds, replaced instead with a focus on accessibility so strongly that I never once felt the urge to customize my gear for a specific fight. I never once bothered to set up an anti-frost build when fighting a cold-based monster. Fire damage? I was -7 on the stat sheet for it, and didn't lose a single one of my lives during a 12-minute long fight in lava. The game is just, it's so close to being amazing, and we'll get into the combat in a bit, but it's pretty stellar overall. Even there though, the new wound system just kinda makes every fight the same in the end, because as you beat up monsters, wounds will appear on their bodies. Holding the left trigger and then pressing the right bumper will have you attack and destroy that wound as long as you hit it. Deals massive damage and drops a monster part every time. I used every weapon during my review period, but I ended up mainly focusing on the longsword at the end, and even just using the basic bone longsword at level 6 would take out most enemies in a handful of minutes, with only the highest level monsters requiring anything close to 15 or 20. When you add into account how little actual hunting there is now, especially with the new secret mounts, it ended up becoming a little boring by the end. Secrets are a Chocobo Raptor style mount that love to automatically run at top speed to whatever your destination is. It sounded and felt really good for early on, but then by hour 5 I kinda missed having to ever actually track anything down or just explore. It's kinda hard to put into words for those who are gonna be new to the series, but Monster Hunter has been infamous for its style of difficulty. It's not just hard to hit things or not get hit. It's hard to find monsters, knowing what they're weak to, and avoiding their strengths. It was everything. Now that you can instantly have almost any item you need ready to go, be Ubered to your target, and then kill it while barely paying attention for the entirety of its content, it's just disappointing. I really thought Wilds would take me 100 hours to review, and in reality, I had completed all of its available content in 35 solo. Talking with fellow reviewers, the game was even easier and shorter when they played with a friend. The only time I ever failed a hunt was when a fellow reviewer match-made into my fight, and they weren't very good. They died 3 times in a row instantly, happened to me 2 times. Those are literally the only 2 times I ever lost a hunt. And this game has everything it needs to be an all-time classic. It's just gone too far for me as a long-term fan. Still, it does play really damned well. You've got your classic main 14 weapons of Monster Hunter, and most are better than ever, with one being the bestest, and it's not even close. The hunting horn just breaks the game entirely by giving you group-wide heals, making already easy fights even more of a joke. And I digress because once, or if they fix things and put in proper difficulty, I think Wilds is going to be up there for the most fun I've ever had playing something. It just feels good to great at everything. Attacking, dodging, your overall movement, and while the secret is the biggest change, there's a bit of a speed increase to Wilds that I can't help but appreciate. It's never clunky, and the monster animations are even faster to match. The game will always tell you what the next button press will do in the top right portion of the screen, and the combat is potentially as deep as ever. The secret isn't only a method of travel, it also allows you to carry 2 weapons at a time. I always had a melee and a ranged option, with the longsword and heavy bowgun being my preferred setup. Each zone has a main camp with various temporary structures available for setup as well. There are vendors, side quests, main quests, and more to visit when you're not slaying the wild beasts. In your tents, you can change gear and restock. I found it nice how easy it was to restock early on, then much like everything else, I kinda soured on it over time. Instead of ever feeling any real pull to hunt or resource gather, it was just always there. Even during fights, your secret is constantly restocked with fresh potions and status cleansers. There are no health bars for enemies, of course, in Monster Hunter. Instead, you need to read the enemy's movements and sounds to know what level of damage they are at. That does change a bit here, as your Palico buddy, little cats that help you fight and you can gear up as well, they just straight up say when a monster's about to die. They also speak human languages now by default instead of their weird cat ones, and I'm not a fan of it, so you can change that back. I really wish that this game made me have to prepare for a hunt. It feels like the tying in of main quests and hunts, where you're not going to know what you're fighting ahead of time, led to them making those fights way too easy. Because you don't know what's coming, so you cannot have a specific setup often. Instead of making it a, this is what you're going to go fight, let's go prepare style of quest every time, they just seemingly made it so everything did less damage and took more from every weapon you have. And it's a shame, because the world tech added into the RE engine for this game can be stunning. During the 2 beta periods, there was a lot of worry over both the resolution and overall look of Wilds on consoles. Thankfully, the retail builds both look and run a hell of a lot better on Xbox Series for me. Played on the X, where there are 3 modes available: quality, balance, and performance. Each of these modes can run at a locked either 30, 40, or 60 frames, or unlocked. The 40 FPS locked requires a 120Hz display, and you don't want to use any of the unlocked unless you have variable refresh rate enabled on your television. I primarily used the balance mode and left it unlocked. It felt decently stable while offering better visual clarity than performance. It did severely dip during a few of the more weather effect heavy hunts. Overall, I think the game looks good most of the time, occasionally amazing, and often kind of ugly. I mentioned it earlier, but there are a large number of sub 240p textures in the game, and the camera will butt right up to something so low resolution that it would have been home on a PS2. And then this is countered by a world state system that changes on the fly, where areas shift between various seasons depending on the story at first, and seemingly random in the postgame. You'll have deserts become lush forests, and enormous dunes giving way to sinkholes that send you and other monsters into caverns. And as lightning strikes the sand, it instantly turns to glass, only to crumble as you or a monster roll through it. It is simultaneously one of the best looking and ugliest games of the generation. Newer monsters and their associated gear look immaculate, as do the faces of main characters. It all has that really nice RE engine look to it most of the time. And while it isn't the focus for me when it comes to this series, the story in Monster Hunter Wilds is another miss. Character motivations seemingly change on a whim, with a young child character at the center of it. He sees himself as a crazed, ravenous beast, in a line that didn't make any sense to me. And things just happen, none of which Capcom wants us to talk directly about, and I never felt a thing during the story other than, please just let me fight something cool again. With the exploration and gear grind feeling useless, I had hoped that at least the post-credit 2/3 of the story would add up the stakes or difficulty. Instead, you mostly fight either the same characters from the first part of the story in a barely tougher form, or see some fun returning ones. And the returning monsters do not always animate or look as high quality as the new ones either. The music, though, is excellent, with catchy orchestrated tunes, upping that epic factor of every fight. You can set the background music of your tent, and those types of customization settings seem to be how they'll monetize the game moving forward, as you also have different gear looks that you can always have on, emojis to send to party and lobby members, and more. And that lobby system is a big step up from previous titles. You can have public lobbies, which will have up to 100 hunters at a time, though during my review period I never had more than 5 with me. There's also private lobbies you can have with friends, which I think have up to 16 people, and link parties. Those link parties let you do quests and be together in a way that means you're just there together, and you don't have to constantly re-invite people for each quest. The menu system is archaic, and overall it's not the best, but it is more streamlined than the series has ever had before. And there are a lot more systems and monsters and other items I'd like to touch on, but our embargo is rather restrictive on what we can talk about since it's coming out a full 4 days before the game launches, and most of the footage for this review is going to have to be from like the first fifth of the title. Wrapping things up, there's been a fair bit of negativity in this review. I really hope the post-launch support brings the gear grind that series veterans know and love. As things are at launch, if you have a group of friends to play with, it'll be a fun, albeit pretty easy 30 to 40 hours before you run out of content to push. If they can bring back that gear grind of needing specific items to have any chance against the toughest monsters, then you can add a few points onto this final launch score.